So at this point, I am completely panicked. Jamie, get out of here, DEFCON 5. There is a spot I can see through the window that isn't painted, and it's glued, it's tacked, freaking out. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. How am I gonna get this off without hurting the door? And we need to be all loaded up and ready to go within an hour. So right before this, I made these cores. I just took 3/4 inch plywood as my core and topped it off with some 1/4 inch poplar veneer. You can see, and here I am cutting out the ever so stressful window opening. So the thing with glass panels, there's so much to think through, and I think that's why I get so edgy. Number one, don't break it. It's tempered glass. If it cracks, if it gets a crack in it, if it breaks, it's gonna shatter, but if it'll stay together, it's like your windshield in your car. So safety glass. Don't break the glass. So that's always in the back of my head. Measure twice, cut once. I think I measured 10 times on each one of these cuts. There's just no going back. So I'm using my track saw and cutting out a perfect square about 1/4 inch wider than the glass panel. Just blowing off some sawdust, using my square and the track, measuring, and then cutting, going back to the one I did. And then I just use my oscillating cutoff tool to square up the corners. Nice and easy, nice and square. Boom, there it goes. Turned out pretty good. And now I'm just cleaning up the inside, making sure that both doors, because they're double hung, match exactly. And they do. So I'm just clamping it in place. One of the things I think through when I'm building glass into a door, big part of me just wants to rabbet a channel that the glass slides in. But then as the wood shifts or it torques, and if it were to crack, if I rabbet in a channel, there's no way to replace the glass. So I gotta think, how can I make it look pretty and have an option where pieces can, the frame can be removed, the glass can be replaced. Heaven forbid something ever happened. I threw a rock at my grandma when I was 5 and broke a huge window because she wouldn't let me see my friend Ryan. And I said, if you won't let me go see Ryan, I'm gonna flow this walk. And I chucked it at her head. So I'm making the 3/4 inch frame that the glass will be sandwiched between. So I cut some 3/4 inch strips, and it's actually the exact width minus maybe a 1/16 of the strips, glass panel strips. So there's just enough room for the mastic to hold it in there. So I'm just dry fitting the frame. Got the frames done on all of those. And then, do you see that? I brought the glass over. Terrifying. Glass. So I framed this one in, and it's just, everything's got to be perfect in my mind. It probably doesn't in anybody else's mind, but I had to frame it in so the frame could be removable, but it had to be permanent. Makes sense? So here I am adding the strips. One side will be glued permanently in place, and then the other framework will be removable. So there'll be some mastic in there, but you'll be able to pull the whole frame out if the glass, knock on wood, were ever to break. So here's the deal with antique German glass. If you look at my whole studio, I found it's 1,000 square feet. Gosh, I feel like I just took my shirt off. I feel exposed. Anyway, I found the remote corner of the studio where the German antique glass was going to sit, and you can still see the sawdust around it. This is where it lived, gently stacked on top of each other, and I had a piece of tape across it and a big X, and I was terrified to put anything on it. I'd lay awake at night thinking one of those boards, a giant Norwegian rat just knocked it off and smashed this. And it's tempered, so it's not like I can recut it. Terrifying. I hate having glass around until it's in the door, and then I hate having to move it in the door, and then I'm almost okay when we leave the job and it's installed, but glass is nerve-wracking. And then I'm just adding the framework, give it a little bit of a shaker style. Measure, measure, measure. So just making sure, because again, these doors are double hung, want to make sure everything lines up perfectly. So I'm just adding the framework and the design I came up with. Doing some brad nails, and we'll go back with some Timbermate, putty it and sand it up real nice because it's going to be painted. She had wanted it painted black and distressed. I thought through, how can we make this look vintage old? So we're going to hand brush and roll primer and paint. But here I am just framing it all in. I do front and back so they look the same on both sides. And I just had to think through the thickness of my veneer to make sure we don't get too thick of a door. I think a standard door is 1 5/8 inches. I try to shoot for 1.5 inches, keep it under 1 3/4 inches, and that fits most of the Barndoor hardware. So here I am just finishing up the framework. I feel like there's a wedge between us. Zebra wood. Instead of spraying it and giving that nice, smooth, glossy finish, we decided to paint it so we would intentionally see some brush strokes and some imperfections in the wood. Normally when I'm preparing for a door, I sand it super smooth, no imperfections, so it's nice and clean. And this one we left some of those, so you'd have some of the brush marks, the roller marks, not major, just enough so it didn't look like it was just created this year. It looked like it was made, in the 70s. I love my guys at the paint store, but every time I have a raw wood project, I argue back and forth with the primer. I'm like, do I need to prime it? Do I really need to prime it? And these doors were going to be black, so I had them tint the primer as dark as they could. You got this nice charcoal gray. I was just afraid. I just didn't want the white to poke through. It is a very black. It's a tricorn black, I think. It's fun. Sometimes on paint days, my studio gets a little bit sunnier, a little prettier, and this beautiful redhead comes and helps. I actually had most of it done when she showed up, but many hands make light work. Like I said, we're brushing and rolling, so we wanted some of the brush marks, and I bought these little jigs that you can screw on. It keeps it up off the table. But I like the jig that I came up with where you can spin the whole door. It just makes life easier. This one we had to flip manually, but it went pretty fast. And you can see it turn black. It's fun. Just adding a little bit of mirror mastic. Just some little dots, cleaning off the glass, and then I'll just drop it in place. Whew, don't say the word drop, right? And I'll add a couple blops on here, and we'll add the face frame. Beautiful. A few pins to hold it in place, but mostly mastic will keep it seated. The client wanted it distressed, where you take the sander and you nick the corners so some of, just looks a little more aged. And when we got it finished with the brush strokes, I thought this looks really good. So I had this crisis. Once you distress, you can't go back to where we were at. So I made the decision to not distress it, because you can always distress it on site. Let's get it up, let the client see it. And this is where I realized I had a big problem. You can't see it in fast motion, but I was freaking out. So here I am in total panic mode because we just flipped the door over and I can see raw wood and some of the paint marks underneath through the glass. So I gotta very gently figure out how can I pry this faceplate off without making it, causing any damage, without breaking the glass, because I had to get it apart before the glue tacked, and then I had to paint it, and then we were installing in a little bit. So that was nerve-wracking, but we got it. It looks great. It's never fun to have an issue, but it always feels good to have it fixed. So just putting the rollers on, I found that it is a time saver if you do the rollers. Get everything put on before you get to the job site. Just one less step there. And it's just, I've got so many different jigs and tricks at the studio to get everything aligned right and make them adjustable. You can see my videos on how I do that. And here we are on site. Beautiful space, and I love that they, the owners that built the house, had these doors in mind way back when they built it, because they left room for everything. And these handles look great. Love what the client found. Had a little bit of mastic seep out, so just cleaning it with this handy dandy scraper. One of my favorite utility blades. And the soft close. Wham! Glides right into place. Beautiful. Turned out fantastic. Let me know what you think. So that's where it lived, and you can see I still can't bring myself to set anything on top of it. And I walked around the studio. I almost shot some hoops yesterday. I was like, oh wait, the glass, but it's not here anymore, and it's hard for me to even do that. Oh, you know, therapeutic. I should just get over my fear. I can't do it. I can't. I see it there. It's terrifying. Okay, one smack. I think I can do it. Oh, I would have just went. Okay, I can use the table again.